Hey everyone. So I don't know how many of y'all like to watch podcasts and interviews, but I really enjoy, learning as much as I can about Bitcoin and what the markets are doing. And I was watching this interview between Daniela Cambone and Jim Rickards, and I just Jim, like, I respect him. Like, he's a New York Times best-selling author, and he's a very smart individual, but in his critique of Bitcoin, he got several things wrong. And so, that's, and what really upset me was, like, at the end of their interview, he's like, yes, I've studied it for thousands of hours. Like, clearly you haven't. Clearly you haven't, Mr. Rickards. So in their interview, what they do, or what Daniela does, is they go down a list of the properties of what makes up money. Durability, portability, fungibility, divisibility, scarcity, and some other things, but that we'll get into. But I just decided that it bothered me so much that I really wanted to make a video about it, because, like, he's just so wrong, and I just needed to point that out. So in their argument, in their first critique, is they compare gold to Bitcoin in durability. And Jim Rickards makes the point that gold is durable because it can last through an explosion. And this is these are things he is saying. These are words, like, I'm not really paraphrasing a whole lot. This is I took this notes as I was listening to. I've watched this video like 2 or 3 times now. These are things that he said. And that you need hydrochloric acid, and that you need, I believe he said sulfuric acid to melt away other metals, and what's left is what you have is gold. But to my counter argument to that is hydrochloric acid and nitric acid put together dissolve gold. So I don't know why he brought up the acid point, because it just depends on what acid you have that you can get rid of gold. Gold can be destroyed. He says that Bitcoin is not durable because if you turn off the electricity, you lose it. You may not be able to interact or use your Bitcoin if you don't have the electricity, but if you don't have electricity, you probably have bigger things to worry about than, how to make a transaction or something. You probably want to get back to a place that has power. But also, that it is false that your Bitcoin are not lost if you just lose electricity. If you have your seed phrase written down, if you have it memorized or on a flashlight, it's so ridiculous to even say that, because, like, if your computer loses power, do you lose everything on your computer? No. It's just a dumb, incoherent statement. So yeah, moving on. But also another point that I wanted to make on that is that Bitcoin only exists as unspent transaction outputs. And that's just part of an algorithm that a lot of computers share. So if you destroy one computer that is running, if you destroy one Bitcoin miner and one node and one computer running the Bitcoin node or a Lightning node, you haven't affected the network whatsoever. It's still there. It's like trying to destroy a picture on the internet. It's still there. Just because you deleted it doesn't mean that somebody else doesn't have a copy. Okay, now moving on. Portability. He gives the point to Bitcoin because it can be sent anywhere, but he uses the example of using flash drives, that you can take it out and store it on a cold storage device or something like that. I guess that's where he was going. I'm trying to give him credit. But that's also, an old person doesn't understand, or he doesn't understand. I mean, it's just simply because of his age. He hasn't spent the time to understand technology. That it can just be put on a flash drive. If you don't have, just memorize the seed phrase, or you can put it on a flash drive and you can lose it, but if you have a copy of the file, then you're good. But then he goes on to say that the Canadian government seized the Bitcoin of, the Canadian truckers. And, to that I say fair point, because the Bitcoin that they took was on exchanges that were connected to certain transaction outputs. So if they had taken them off of the exchange and taken custody of it, the Canadian government would not have been able to do anything. So you have to know how to play the game. But, there again, Bitcoin is also much more portable than gold will ever be. But in his response to why gold is portable, he didn't really actually answer the question. And in fact, he shot himself in the foot later because he was talking about, like, in another point, I believe, when Germany was asking for their gold back, and it was okay, this is like a point of, like, cost of just doing transactions in gold, is you have to verify that it is actually gold. They sent it to Switzerland for refinement, so that it wasn't pure gold. Like, there's no pure Bitcoin; it's just Bitcoin. And then I believe it came from the U.S. to Switzerland and over to Germany, and all of that, clearly took a lot of, trucks or vehicles or trains or, helicopters or whatever transportation device, and I'm certain that wasn't free or cheap. And then, also in that process, you could have had many people try and steal your gold, but you don't need to refine Bitcoin to such an extent, or at all, because it's just Bitcoin, and you really don't have the worry about that time delay between sending your gold and receiving your gold to another location, because Bitcoin is near instantaneous. It's like at light speed, just about. Next point is the fungibility aspect, and that's where you can't tell the difference between one gold coin and another, because gold can be melted down, or I guess in his other example, it can be exploded or some shit, and that you can't tell what one melted bar is from another. But I'd say to that, there's a lot more information now these days than there were in the past. This is like, if a country like Germany wanted to anonymize their gold, to try and make it more fungible, there would be a paper trail of, Switzerland making that transaction for them, or, them doing it themselves. There's going to be documentation somewhere of where that gold came from. Currently, Bitcoin is, and then he goes on to say that Bitcoin is not fungible because one bit of information could dox you, and law enforcement would know all about you from day one, which is mostly false. You need a bit more information than just one piece of info, and it's hard to confirm who the owner of Bitcoin is after so many transactions, and also things like CoinJoin and CoinSwaps exist, along with privacy layers on the way. I believe Mimblewimble on the Litecoin network is basically a use case for privacy on the Bitcoin network. So if that works out really well, it could be considered as an upgrade for Bitcoin. And then I don't know exactly how anonymous Bitcoin could become by then. Bitcoin could be completely anonymous. They skipped the divisibility part of the argument because it's clearly that Bitcoin would win that. You can't transact in dust amount of gold. I mean, and then you have so many other problems to worry about, like if somebody sneezes, then it's gone. But clearly you can send one Satoshi, which is smaller than, if you took 1/100 millionth of an ounce of gold, I'm not even sure you'd be able to see it on your finger. Like, you can send one Satoshi, which is 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin, and the person that receives it will see it. It will be there. It's near tangible in a digital sense. They move on to scarcity, but Jim Rickards gives the point to Bitcoin in a weird way, but he says it's a flaw because and then he also doesn't understand exactly like the distribution schedule of Bitcoin. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, he doesn't understand. He says he's done some cursory research. He's read a few articles here and there, and he's listened to some people, maybe watched some podcasts, but he's clearly not read like book after book after book of what Bitcoin is. He's not read the Bitcoin Standard. I can just tell by what he's saying. Like, he would not be saying these things if he had done more research. It's not been thousands of hours. He's maybe done 50, if that. Anyway, and he says that Bitcoin scarcity is a flaw because of some reason. But he doesn't really, go into it. But he says that part of the reason why gold, is scarce, but its increase an annual supply of roughly 1.8 a year is good because it matches global GDP. And I don't understand why that's a good thing at all. It essentially means in some sense that the value of gold will remain the same proportional to the amount of wealth created on the planet. So that means gold's going nowhere, which it clearly has not done in 10 years. But to go back to the argument about scarcity about Bitcoin, the Mises Institute says that any amount of money is good for an economy to function if it's capped and highly divisible, which Bitcoin is. And community can get better. And this is one of the other things that he went on to say, is that the community can get together and change the cap. That's wrong. It's been tried multiple times. If you want to try and change the cap of Bitcoin, Mr. Jimmy Rickards, you go right ahead. And that you have to trust other people won't group together to increase the supply, and the trustlessness is gone. And that there is and what I would say to that is that there is no trust. You run your own node, and then you can run your own transactions through that node, and then you also have a miner so that you can hash the network and protect it yourself and be a part of the whole network. These things allow for you to not to have to trust anybody. Like if you and somebody else each had a miner and a Lightning Network node, and no one else on the planet used Bitcoin, I'm pretty sure you could still transact with each other. You wouldn't need to rely on anyone other than the fact that they have machines to support the network, which is almost to exactly say this, like, the only reason why gold has value is because other people see it has value. So if people mine Bitcoin, that means that they see it has value, and therefore cascading effects and so forth. So he just doesn't understand, And then he rambles on a bit about Bitcoin is bad because it removes the bond market, and that the whole credit system that we live in is debt-based, and that's a good thing because if you want to borrow money in a deflationary environment, then you don't want to be a lender in a deflationary environment because you get less money back, which, fair point, but we'll see what happens. But they also talk about the free from censorship aspect of Bitcoin and gold. And he says that Bitcoin is not free from censorship because of the truckers, but I would say just take your Bitcoin off of the exchanges and you are fine. You can still transact privately with anybody that you so choose, and you'll have no problem. Just get your coins off the exchanges. And then also gold is and then he says gold is censorship free because it can be. This is weird. Like he shoots himself in the foot again. He says gold is censorship free because it can be stolen by governments from your bank or by a SWAT team. And also provides an example in 1930 when the government stole everyone's gold by force. I don't understand how that is censorship free. Like, he says it is, and then he gives these examples of how it's not. And then one of their last points before they kind of get into their closing discussions is about history, that gold has history and Bitcoin does not have history. And I'll give the point to gold. Sure, it's been around and used as money for 3,000 to 6,000 years, somewhere in that time range. But I will say that as a technology, Bitcoin has had nonstop operation for 99.99% of its life. And there's not any other technology on the planet, I would say for certain, that can say that. So that is a feat in and of itself, to have nonstop operation for over 10 years and to have worked perfectly this entire time with, minimal, maintenance. You just have a miner running it, you plug it in and it works. That half point to Bitcoin in that. But gold's been around for a long time and it's been used. So these are just technical aspects about Bitcoin that I thought he got wrong. So I hope, if he sees this, or if somebody can forward it to him, please do more research, Mr. Jim. I respect you, but you got all this stuff wrong. So I hope y'all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. That's all I got.